If I told you that the darkest fairy tales, the ones with wicked queens and monstrous vanity, are not just stories? What if I told you that one of the most powerful noblewomen in history is accused of a crime so vile, so unbelievably cruel, that it has echoed through centuries, inspiring tales of vampires and monsters? We're not talking about fiction. We're talking about a Hungarian countess from the 16th century, a woman of immense wealth, intelligence, and power. Her name was Elizabeth Bathory, but history remembers her by a more chilling title, the Blood Countess. Her legend claims she was responsible for the torture and murder of over 600 young girls, all in a depraved quest for eternal youth. But how much of this horrifying story is true, and what dark secrets lie buried beneath the ruins of her castle? Today, we separate fact from folklore as we descend into the terrifying world of Elizabeth Bathory. Before the blood and the horror, there was immense privilege. Elizabeth Bathory was born in 1560 into one of the most powerful and influential noble families in the Kingdom of Hungary. The Bathory family wasn't just rich, they were royalty in all but name. They produced kings, cardinals, and legendary warriors. From a young age, Elizabeth was given an education far beyond that of most women of her time. She was fluent in Latin, German, Hungarian, and Greek. She was raised amidst opulent wealth and political intrigue, understanding the mechanics of power before she was even a teenager. Her childhood, however, was also shadowed by darkness. Epilepsy, then known as the falling sickness, ran in the family, and rumors of inbreeding, Satanism, and cruelty among her relatives were common whispers in the halls of power. She was a product of a violent and superstitious age, a brilliant mind born into a world where power was absolute and life was cheap. At the tender age of 15, Elizabeth was married to Ferenc d'Asti, another scion of Hungarian nobility. Theirs was a political match, a union of two powerful houses designed to consolidate wealth and influence. d'Asti was a celebrated soldier, known as the Black Knight of Hungary for his prowess and ferocity in battle against the Ottoman Empire. His long military campaigns, however, meant he was often away from home for months, even years at a time. This left Elizabeth, a young and intelligent woman, in complete control of their vast estates, including the formidable Countess castle. It was here, in the isolated fortress nestled in the Carpathian Mountains, that Elizabeth learned to wield power with an iron fist. She was the master of the castle, managing its finances, defenses, and the hundreds of servants who lived and worked within its walls. And it was here, away from the prying eyes of her husband and the royal court, that her darker impulses allegedly began to surface. The first whispers of Elizabeth's cruelty were small, almost dismissible acts of discipline against her servant girls. In an era where corporal punishment was the norm, her methods were noted as being exceptionally harsh. Stories began to circulate among the peasantry of girls being beaten for a poorly stitched dress or having pins stuck under their fingernails for a moment of inattention. Some tales suggest she was influenced by her sadistic aunt, Countess Clara Bathory, while others point to figures in her court who practiced dark arts. These early acts, whether exaggerated or not, painted a picture of a woman who derived pleasure from the pain of those beneath her. She was the absolute authority in her domain, and her word was law. For the young girls sent to serve her, this meant that her displeasure could have terrifying and painful consequences, a chilling prelude to the horrors that were to come. The legend's central, horrifying motive stems from one of humanity's oldest fears, the fear of aging. As Elizabeth entered her 40s, she, like any noblewoman of her time, became preoccupied with preserving her beauty. The most famous story, though likely a later embellishment, provides the catalyst for her monstrous transformation. The tale goes that one day, a servant girl accidentally pulled Elizabeth's hair while combing it. The countess flew into a rage and struck the girl with such force that blood splattered onto her hand. After wiping it away, Elizabeth believed her skin where the blood had been looked smoother, younger, and more vibrant. At that moment, a depraved idea took root in her mind: if a few drops of a young girl's blood could do this, what could a full bath accomplish? This alleged epiphany marked a turning point, transforming her casual cruelty into a systematic quest for a gruesome fountain of youth. With her new objective, Elizabeth allegedly turned Countess Castle into a personal slaughterhouse. Her methods of torture were said to be as creative as they were diabolical. The accounts, largely drawn from the later trial of her accomplices, describe a nightmarish scene. Girls were allegedly beaten with heavy clubs, their hands burned, and their flesh bitten off in fits of rage. In the brutal winters, they were reportedly stripped naked, forced outside, and doused with water until they froze into living ice sculptures. Conversely, in the summer, they were said to be coated in honey and left tied up for swarms of insects to feast upon. The most infamous of her supposed contraptions was a device similar to an Iron Maiden, a coffin-like cage lined with sharp spikes that would pierce the victim inside, allowing their blood to be collected. While the existence of such a device is heavily debated by historians, the testimonies painted a picture of a castle where the screams of young women were a daily occurrence. A reign of terror on this scale could not have been conducted alone. Elizabeth relied on a small, trusted circle of accomplices to help carry out her atrocities. Her chief collaborators were four individuals: Ilona J., her old nurse and confidant, Dorothea Sentis, a local woman known as Dorka who was rumored to be a witch, Katarina Benek, a laundry woman, and Johannes Ugeri, known as Fixco, her valet and the only male accomplice. They were her procurers and her assistants. They would lure young peasant girls to the castle with promises of well-paid work as servants. Once inside, these girls would vanish, their lives ending in Elizabeth's torture chambers. Jay and Dorka were said to be the most actively involved in the tortures, holding the girls down and assisting the Countess in her gruesome rituals. Their loyalty, bought with fear and reward, enabled Elizabeth's depravity to continue unchecked for years. For over a decade, Elizabeth's victims were primarily the daughters of local peasants. In the harsh feudal society of 16th century Hungary, these girls were disposable. Their disappearances were often explained away as them running off, or they were simply not investigated at all. This gave Elizabeth a sense of invincibility. Her fatal mistake was hubris. As her paranoia and bloodlust grew, she became less careful. She established a gymnasium, or girls' academy, in her castle, ostensibly to teach courtly etiquette to the daughters of lesser gentry. When these noble girls began to disappear just like the peasants, their powerful families started asking questions that could not be ignored. The disappearance of a servant was a tragedy for a family, the disappearance of a noble's daughter was a political incident. The whispers that had once been confined to the villages now reached the ears of the king himself. By 1610, the rumors against Countess Bathory had become too loud to ignore. King Matthias II of Hungary, who owed a significant debt to the Bathory estate, ordered György Thurs, the Palatine of Hungary, the highest official in the land after the king, to launch a formal investigation. Thurs collected testimony from over 300 witnesses, including survivors, and the families of victims. The accounts were consistent and horrifying. Armed with this damning evidence, on the night of December 30, 1610, Thurs and his soldiers conducted a surprise raid on Countess Castle. According to Thurs' own letters, he caught the Countess and her cohorts red-handed. He wrote of finding one girl dead and another dying in the main hall, with others imprisoned and bearing the marks of torture. The castle, once a symbol of Bathory's power, had now become the scene of her downfall. The subsequent legal proceedings were bizarre, to say the least. A formal trial was held in 1611, but the main defendant, Elizabeth Bathory, was never present. Her noble name and powerful family protected her from the humiliation of a public trial and execution. Instead, her accomplices faced the full force of the law. Ilona J. and Dorothea Sentis had their fingers torn off with hot pincers before being burned at the stake. Fixco, considered a lesser accomplice, was beheaded before his body was thrown onto the same pyre. Katarina Benek, who provided evidence against the others, received a life sentence in prison. Elizabeth herself was never formally convicted of any crime. The trial served its purpose, it confirmed the narrative of her guilt and punished her servants, but it kept the scandal of a high-born countess being a mass murderer from shattering the nobility's reputation. While she avoided a public execution, Elizabeth's fate was arguably just as grim. By order of Palatine Thurs, she was sentenced to a unique and cruel form of house arrest. She was taken back to Actus Castle and walled up inside a suite of rooms. The windows and doors were bricked over, leaving only a small slot through which food and water could be passed. She was to live out the rest of her days in total isolation, a prisoner in the very castle where she had held absolute power. For 4 years, the Blood Countess lived in this self-made tomb. In August of 1614, a guard noted her complaining of cold hands. The next morning, Elizabeth Bathory was found dead. She was buried, but local villagers protested her being laid to rest in the church graveyard, so her body was secretly moved back to the Bathory family estate, its final resting place unknown to this day. So, who was Elizabeth Bathory? Was she history's most prolific female serial killer, a monster whose vanity drove her to commit unspeakable acts? Or was she the victim of a political conspiracy, a powerful and wealthy widow whose lands and influence were coveted by her enemies, including the king who owed her a fortune? The historical records are based almost entirely on witness testimonies gathered by men who stood to gain from her downfall, and the most sensational claims, like the bloodbaths, only appeared in print decades after her death. The truth likely lies somewhere in the murky depths between fact and legend. What do you think really happened within the walls of Actus Castle? Was she a monster or a scapegoat? Let us know your theory in the comments below. And if you found this dive into one of history's darkest mysteries compelling, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more chilling tales, and share this video with someone who isn't afraid of the dark. Thanks for watching.